This is the last lesson in the Angular form introduction section, and we'll have a look at how to deal with dates in Angular. Well, it's quite easy actually. Our input type was a text, so the date itself was not being treated as a date, so let's change it to be date. And by doing that, Angular will be using its own input type date directive, and it will overwrite the default behavior that we have in our standard HTML. So let's save it and we'll go back to our usual page. And as you can see, we have already this nice date with a placeholder which is month, day and year. And we have also a calendar where to select our date from. So let's select one date, January the 6th, 2015, and let's try to submit an event so we'll see how it will look like. Event test, description desk, location here. No special event and nothing in the event type. So when I submit that, you see that our date is being stored in the ISO format with time zone as well, but we don't want to display that kind of thing to the user, so I'll introduce something which we'll be discussing furtherly, which is a filter. So if we go to the very bottom of our add event template, we can add a filter here that will be pipe date colon, and here we'll define the format that we want to use for the date. So it will be here, month. Remember to use the uppercase syntax because this is the ISO version. And then we have the days. Okay, so we have here, month and day. Let's save it and let's go back again to our code. And we can add an event. So event 1, task as usual, a random date. And now we can submit, and as you can see the date is now nicely formatted in a human readable format, which is great, right? There's something else we can do with our directive. We'll talk about it more when it comes to validations, but there's also something else that will happen when we do that. So we can define a minimum date and a max date, and our input will be considered valid if the date picked is between the time range. So let's go back again to our date field and let's add the min equals. We need to use always the ISO format, so this will be 2015 0101 and max will be 2015. Let's use only January, yeah? So the 30. Okay, so if I refresh my page for the last time, you see this placeholder, but what happens is that the user won't be able to select any month that is not January. So it's nice because the calendar is automatically updated to our time range, so unless the user types manually the date, there's no way that they can go wrong. So when he selects that date, let's create the event again, it's fine. So in order to fix the placeholder issue, what I would recommend you to do is to initialize your model to a proper date. So let's do that immediately. Let's go back to the very top of our controller.js and let's create a this.event form.date equals new date, and this accepts the year as usual, the month, but in JavaScript months are going from 0 to 11, so if it's January it will be 0 and 1, okay? And also we want to initialize our event form just to be sure to an empty object, so Angular will not complain about a non-existing object. So I refresh it, and as you can see my form date field is being initialized to the date I've created. If my date would have been something different like 2016, which is in the future, that can easily be modified, and as you can see is properly initialized. So I would suggest you do that every time you deal with dates. Angular has also other types of the times that we can deal with. It's not only date, we have date time, we have month. We can try with time, for example. If I change my input type to be time and I refresh, you see that the date field changes, and this time we'll be able to choose only between hours and not days. Keep in mind that input type date is not yet supported from all the browsers, therefore I would recommend you set a proper placeholder for the users, so in all the browsers they know what should be the format of the date they need to input. So let's do that. Instead of using event date as placeholder, let's put it like year, month and day. So well, we won't see that in Chrome because Chrome supports it, but in other browsers, if we don't support date, you'll see the placeholder instead, and so the user experience will be still acceptable. It's now time to move into validations. There's a lot to talk about. We'll see how to set required fields, how to validate the user input, how to prevent the user from submitting something that is not supposed to submit, and how to display the validation errors on screen. Everything will be discussed in the next section.